Regardless of the veracity of the allegations, and while our accused employees remain innocent until proven guilty, we have placed both employees on leaves of absence effective immediately, saying no voter fraud has been alleged, and Smartmatic is not indicted, okay? Just our president, which they don't even tell us. Malik Brown was Deputy Secretary General of the UN and is now president of the Soros Open Society Foundations. What is going on? Why allow paper ballots and voter IDs when you can make a fortune just harvesting biometric data? Says Smartmatic grotesquely understates the problem. Those indicted are not employees, okay? They're the co-founder and the president, the brother-in-law of the chairman and the CEO. Smartmatic, an election company we talked a lot about in 2020 when we had some problems with that election, is now facing a PR crisis because the president of Smartmatic was indicted today. He's among 4 who were indicted by a federal grand jury for bribery and fraud-related charges related to electronic voting systems. Not good. The DOJ is naming this guy called Roger Alejandro Piñate Martinez in the news release, but does not identify him as president of Smartmatic. So we're going to read through this actual press release from the DOJ. Office of Public Affairs tells us 4 men were charged in a Philippine bribery and money laundering scheme, right? So it's not here in the United States, it's in Philippines. And it's just a couple of people who were involved in the company. They don't mention, it's like the president of the whole operation. CEO, I believe was his title. Smartmatic, says CNN, the voting technology company that's now suing Fox News and Trump, was implicated. Court documents indicate the DOJ has filed money laundering charges against former election administrator of the Philippines, Andres Bautista, and that 4 executives from Smartmatic subsidiaries are also involved. Now, Smartmatic is responding to this, and we'll go through their statement. But here is what this analysis looks like from this fellow. And so let's go through this thread from J. Michael Waller. He tells us that Smartmatic says that in their own documents that President Piñate played a critical role in planning and executing the world's largest election using optical scanners. Now, this was in the Philippines, and in Smartmatic winning the largest election contract in U.S. history, all right? So that's this guy. He's clipping this directly from their website. It says, Roger played a critical role in all of this stuff, right? And I'm sure, corruption, bribery, that type of stuff is only limited to non-American countries, because we're so different than everybody else. So here's what J. Michael Waller says. Now, before we continue, let's go take a look at the DOJ assessment, because he is the president, Smartmatic president, indicted today. He was a team member. As the president of Smartmatic, Roger is responsible for the execution of strategic efforts, daily business functions. He's the co-creator of the company's long-term vision, electrical engineering, co-founded Smartmatic with 2 partners, played a critical role in executing the world's largest election using optical scanners in the Philippines and winning the largest election contract in U.S. history in LA. So here's what the DOJ says about this. Says, all right, look, a federal grand jury in Florida came back with an indictment today, charging 3 executives of an election voting machine company, Smartmatic, and a former chairman of the Commission on Elections, so COMELEC, we'll call it, of the Republic of Philippines for their roles in bribery, money laundering to retain and obtain business related to the 2016 Philippine elections. But they say, according to the indictment, between 2015 and 2018, so for about 3 years, this guy, the president, Roger Alejandro Piñate Martinez, 49, a Venezuelan citizen and someone who lives as a resident Boca Raton, Florida, and Jorge Miguel Vasquez, 62, a U.S. citizen and resident of Davie, Florida, along with others, allegedly caused at least $1 million in bribes to be paid to Juan Andres Donato Bautista, former chairman of COMELEC, so somebody over in the Philippines. These bribes were allegedly paid to obtain and retain business related to providing voting machines and election services for the 2016 Philippine elections, including the release of value-added tax payments. Now, the co-conspirators allegedly funded the bribes through a slush fund that was created by over-invoicing the cost per voting machine for the 2016 Philippine elections. To disguise and conceal the nature of the corrupt payments, the co-conspirators used coded language to refer to the slush fund and cause the creation of fraudulent contracts and sham loan agreements to justify the money transfers. The co-conspirators then allegedly laundered funds through banks in Asia, Europe, and the United States, including in Florida. Now, Piñate and Vasquez, so one president, are each charged with 1 count of conspiracy to violate the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act that Hunter never got charged with for doing exactly this. Bautista, Pinate, Vasquez, and Eli, a dual citizen of Venezuela and Israel, are each charged with 1 count of conspiracy to commit money laundering and 3 counts of international money laundering monetary instruments. If convicted, they face a maximum 5 years in prison and more. Principal deputy is leading this up. HSI is leading this up. Trial attorneys are so-and-so. And so interesting little update there. So we're keeping our eyes out, trying to get tabs on the indictment. Where is that physical indictment? But a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? Isn't this fun? Here is what J. Michael Waller reported for us. He says, here's President Obama voting on the Smartmatic voting machine, right? Even he says it. Voted early today in 2016. Make sure you vote too. Nice Smartmatic machine, right in charge of our elections. Now, this continues. Smartmatic says that its indicted president and COO continues to play a key role in nurturing Smartmatic's relationship with clients. So this is the guy, and he's involved in this. And Smartmatic is telling us that they deny this. They say, Smartmatic has learned that 2 of our employees have been indicted for alleged violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act in the Philippines almost 10 years ago. Regardless of the veracity of the allegations, and while our accused employees remain innocent until proven guilty, we have placed both employees on leaves of absence effective immediately, saying no voter fraud has been alleged. And Smartmatic is not indicted, okay? Just our president, which they don't even tell us. It's just 2 of our employees. Bro, is the co-founder. They're on a leave of absence. Okay. No voter fraud has been alleged, and Smartmatic has not been indicted. No, just your co-founder. Voters worldwide must be assured that the elections they participate in are conducted with the utmost integrity and transparency. Really? So hopefully they'll be transparent about who got indicted. Was it their CEO, their president? These are the values that Smartmatic lives by. They don't even tell us the dude's name. So much for transparency. Hilarious. So that's their statement. 1 million views. We've learned 10 years ago. Nah. So very curious about what's happening there. I'm sure it is going to be settled out in the courts. Here's more from J. Michael Waller. He tells us, from today's news release we just read, one of the other 4 indicted is Eli Moreno, age 44, Venezuelan. Moreno is the brother-in-law of this guy called Antonio Mojica, also Venezuelan, who is also the previous president of Smartmatic and reportedly Smartmatic's largest shareholder. And as we're reading this, and like Venezuela, we're starting to think about, you know, guys like Hugo Chavez, and then we start thinking about people like Sidney Powell, and like the dots start to connect themselves, don't they? Isn't it interesting? And we were kind of critical of that whole Sidney Powell, Hugo Chavez general thing where they just bought technology and whatever. Remember that? Oh, it's true. 9 years ago, Smartmatic chairman Mark Malik Brown admitted on the Philippine TV that part of our technology is licensed from Dominion. Huh, that's curious. Malik Brown was Deputy Secretary General of the UN and is now president of the Soros Open Society Foundations. What is going on? Miami Herald is the first mainstream media outlet with a story on the federal indictment of Smartmatic president and co-founder Roger Pinate that Smartmatic, the most transparent company in the world, doesn't even mention on charges of fraud and bribery. Says big news was first out on X, thanks to J. Michael Waller for breaking this. Miami Herald says they gained notoriety after the company was chosen by Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez to replace the country's voting machines. Is Sidney Powell vindicated? The company grew by acquiring the much larger Sequoia voting systems in 2006, though the company later announced it had divested its stake in that company. This guy, Antonio Mujica, who co-founded Smartmatic with Roger Pinate, is the brother-in-law of another federal defendant in the fraud and that bribery case, Elsie Moreno. The third Smartmatic co-founder, Anzola, is deceased. The 3 of those guys helped dictator Hugo Chavez manipulate the voting system to change the Constitution and impose a dictatorship. It's now trending. Smartmatic was yesterday, thanks to J. Michael Waller. Antonio Mojica, the brother-in-law, was indicted along with Smartmatic. Now he's the CEO of Smartmatic. So this guy also indicted, right? CEO and the president, 2 bros. They called him 2 employees on Smartmatic. He's tagging him. What do you say about this? Why allow paper ballots and voter IDs when you can make a fortune just harvesting biometric data? Says Smartmatic grotesquely understates the problem. Those indicted are not employees, okay? They're the co-founder and the president, the brother-in-law of the chairman and the CEO. Woo! Foreign CEO of Smartmatic praised the successful efforts to censor conservatives. Remember these guys? Check this page to see how he was in lockstep with Obama, Biden, Harris. This is what Anthony Mogica says here, co-founder of Smartmatic, investing in democracy. He said, Google announced steps to counter the spread of disinformation, right, before elections. Right? Tucker got fired from Fox for challenging these election companies. Fox News bent the knee. Here's almost $750 million. Here you go. We continue doing our part to ensure that every election runs securely and transparently. Right. Read more in my new LinkedIn post. Okay, Antonio. J. Michael Waller, 4 years ago, he says, in this important 6-part thread, Byron York of the DC Examiner, remember that, 2020? We talked about it, revealed an affidavit from a former confidant of the Venezuelan dictator Hugo Chavez to show how the Dominion Smartmatic vote-changing operation worked. And Sidney Powell was talking all about that. We read through her motions, and it was a mess. I'm not saying her specifically, but the whole situation was a mess. It was like just everybody was trying to file motions. There were deadlines all over the place. We were trying to keep tabs on it. I remember specifically where all the lawsuits filing, where all the re-election deadlines. Sidney Powell, to her credit, was trying to manage multiple different efforts in multiple different states. It was a lot. Now, the operation began decades earlier. The source was a top-level member of Hugo Chavez's presidential guard and was a personal witness to the development and the operation of all this software. The source directly witnessed Smartmatic's collusion with the regime leadership. Smartmatic's system was used to change the voting to amend Venezuela's constitution. Smartmatic had the repeated meetings with Chavez. In 2013 election, Chavez then was 2 million votes ahead. The opponent was 2 million votes ahead, and then the system reset. Kind of like ours, except they reset ours at like 2 in the morning. Smartmatic exports its software, they say, for rigging votes across America. Dominion does the same thing. This is Center for Security. Fraud went public. Then in November, J. Michael Waller wrote, I wrote that Venezuela and the regime involvement in Smartmatic posed a grave counterintelligence threat. And saying here, the Bolivian regime of Venezuela survived only because of the secret services of Cuba, Russia, China, and others. Many sophisticated interests happening here. So just absolutely wild. So a lot of the concern about Smartmatic seems like there is at least some evidence of fraud, bribery, corruption. They're, of course, presumed innocent in the court of law, but we've got very interesting reaction from the company. They're not even telling us the names of these people. So CNN says that the company responded saying, the Smartmatic spokeswoman said, winning a bid in the Philippines is never solely one individual's preference or decision, and the company won and lost bids all over the place. Now, this could boost the defense for Fox News. Could say, yeah, the company tarnished their own reputation. It wasn't Fox News that tarnished their reputation. So interesting stuff from Smartmatic. Now, why they're being indicted right now in Florida, I want to see the indictment, hopefully at some point, and when this case hits the docket, we'll take a closer look. Thank you for subscribing and joining us as we do.